My name is Emily, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person to share my private life online. But after what happened in Denver, I realized my story isn't just mine. It's a warning. Last month, the person I trusted most, my closest, work friend and bridesmaid, betrayed me in a way that made me question every moment of our 5 years of friendship. And the way it unfolded, it wasn't just personal, it was public. It bled into my workplace, into my marriage, into my peace of mind. So here I am, laying it all out for strangers. The whispers, the screenshots, the wedding, the fallout, and the revenge I never thought I'd need to take. When I first met Anna, I was 22 and wide-eyed, just beginning my degree in communications. She was my age, but already ahead. Working part-time at a firm in our field, her name casually dropped in conversations by professors who admired her drive. At the office, she was everyone's favorite, especially a senior manager who seemed to treat her less like an intern and more like a protégé. At first, I thought it was harmless. She was charismatic, confident, and always eager to extend a hand. When I eventually landed a role at the same workplace, she became my guide. She introduced me to the right people, taught me unwritten rules, and for a while, it truly felt like I had stumbled into a sisterhood. Not long after, Jessica, a close friend from outside work, joined us. She was warm, grounded, and quickly slipped into the trio. Suddenly, we weren't just coworkers. We were a team. We stayed late together, survived impossible deadlines, and spent weekends venting over wine and laughing until our sides hurt. When I got engaged, choosing bridesmaids felt natural. My oldest friends would stand beside me, of course, but so would Anna and Jessica. They weren't just friends, they had become pillars in my daily life, the kind of women I thought I'd look back on decades later and say, they were there through it all. Planning the wedding with them felt like the perfect blend of personal and professional worlds, everything aligning the way I had always hoped. What I didn't realize at the time was that Anna's loyalty wasn't rooted in friendship. It was transactional. And while I saw her as a sister, she already saw me as something else entirely, a source of stories to trade for influence. Life with Anna and Jessica as my coworkers was the kind of office dream most people wish for. We weren't just colleagues, we were a unit. We had inside jokes scribbled on sticky notes, whispered encouragement during brutal deadlines, and covered for each other when personal emergencies popped up. With Anna's special connection to the manager, it even felt like we had a safety net, as though she could shield us from some of the worst office politics. For me, it was balance at its finest. At home, I had a steady, supportive fiancé. At work, I had two women who felt like family. When wedding planning began, Anna seemed to dive in with both feet. She suggested color palettes, curated playlists, even offered to manage little details I hadn't thought of. She felt like the bridesmaid every bride dreams of, dedicated, enthusiastic, and unshakably loyal. I thought my wedding would bind us closer, turning our friendship into something permanent. But I didn't see it then. Anna wasn't building me up. She was quietly using everything I shared to feed someone else, and eventually to unravel everything we had built. It started subtly, almost like background noise I could ignore. Until I couldn't. The manager, a man I had never trusted with anything personal, suddenly began dropping casual comments that landed like darts. One morning he smirked and said, "So the bridesmaids are fighting over dresses? Hope it doesn't." Overshadow the big day. My stomach dropped. That conversation had taken place in a private group chat, only me, Anna, and Jessica. A week later, he asked if the hotel we'd booked had enough champagne stocked for all the drama. Again, details I had whispered only to my bridesmaids. Jessica wasn't close to him, barely exchanged pleasantries at work. That left one explanation. Anna was talking. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd slipped something in passing. Maybe he overheard. Maybe I was just stressed with wedding planning and imagining connections that weren't there. But the pattern grew too sharp to dismiss. Every time I confided in Anna, my doubts, my frustrations, my excitement, the manager would twist it into an office joke, delivered with a knowing smirk that made my skin crawl. What stung wasn't just the betrayal of privacy, it was Anna's mask. She never flinched, never admitted a word, just smiled at me like everything was normal, like I was crazy for suspecting her. And as the wedding drew closer, I began to feel the unease settle deeper in my chest. The very person I had chosen to stand beside me on my biggest day now felt like a stranger, one I couldn't fully trust. For the first time, the thought crossed my mind. Maybe she didn't belong in my bridal party at all. The truth clicked when Jessica came to me in confidence. She told me that she had shared something small with Anna, just a random detail about her weekend. Within days, the manager repeated it back to her almost word for word. That was the moment I knew. Anna was feeding him everything. She wasn't just a bridesmaid, she was a pipeline. I felt my stomach drop. Every little vulnerable thing I had shared, the stress about money, the insecurity about fitting into my dress, even a fight I had with my fiancé, was potentially being relayed back to him. And he was the kind of man who thrived on gossip. Suddenly, I felt exposed. My private life wasn't private anymore. Worse, it was entertainment for a man who had way too much influence in my career. I wanted to confront Anna, but the wedding was just weeks away. The last thing I needed was a meltdown in the middle of planning. So I bit my tongue, kept smiling, and told myself I'd deal with it later. The humiliation didn't hit during the wedding. It came after. On the surface, everything had gone perfectly. The day was stunning, the photos were gorgeous, and for once, I didn't feel the shadow of Anna looming over me. She had called days. Before, sobbing that a relative had passed away and she couldn't make it. And here's the awful truth. I felt relieved. Relieved she wouldn't be in the bridal photos. Relieved I wouldn't have to watch her whispering in corners. Relieved I wouldn't have to wonder what private moment she'd turn into office chatter next. My wedding felt untouched, sacred, without her there. But when I returned to work, the air was different. Whispers seemed to ripple just behind me. Colleagues gave me glances that lingered too long, as if they were sizing me up with knowledge I hadn't shared. And then came the manager's smirk. "Shame your bridesmaid couldn't make it. Hope it wasn't too dramatic." His tone dripped with suggestion, like he knew a version of the story I hadn't told. That was the dagger. Anna hadn't just excused herself from my wedding, she had spun a narrative in her absence. Whatever she had told him, whatever she had told others, it had cast me in the role of villain. I could feel it in the way people hesitated before congratulating me, in the way conversations shifted when I walked into the room. My private celebration had been dragged into office politics, twisted by someone who was supposed to stand beside me in support. The relief I had felt on my wedding day now soured into dread. Anna hadn't needed to attend to ruin things. She'd found a way to stain it anyway. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd been too distant. Maybe she thought I didn't care about her loss. I reached out multiple times, reassuring her I wasn't upset she missed the wedding. Every time she brushed me off with a sharp, "It's fine." But her tone wasn't fine. She was cold, condescending, and every interaction dripped with hostility. Meanwhile, Jessica confessed that she too had been burned, hearing her own words parroted back from the manager. We both realized we weren't crazy. Anna had betrayed us. The guilt I carried slowly shifted into anger. Why was I the one second-guessing myself when she was the one leaking our lives to a man twice our age? Why was I the one apologizing while she got to play the victim? I didn't want revenge in the screaming match. Throw drinks kind of way. I wasn't interested in stooping to her level or turning the office into a battlefield. What I wanted was clarity, proof that I wasn't imagining things, that the betrayal wasn't just in my head. So I started small. Jessica and I began comparing notes, laying out conversations we'd each had with Anna against things the manager had later brought up. The pattern was undeniable. Every private detail we shared with her, he recycled as if it were common knowledge. I started archiving everything. Screenshots of texts, timestamps of when I told Anna something, followed by when it surfaced in the manager's casual comments. I went back through old messages and found one where Anna had written, almost proudly, "He trusts me more than anyone else here." Another time, she joked about how she could get away with anything because of her relationship with him. They weren't confessions exactly, but together they painted a picture, one I knew people wouldn't be able to ignore. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about survival. If she wanted to play the role of the victim while whispering, "Poison behind my back," I needed a way to protect myself. Quietly, I built a folder, evidence that showed the truth without me needing to shout. Because deep down, I knew the day would come when her mask would slip, and when it did, I wanted to be ready to hold up the mirror and let her see exactly what she'd become. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. We were in a team meeting, going over a new client pitch, when Anna decided to make me her target. She leaned back in her chair, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Some people just can't handle the pressure here." The words stung, but what hurt more was the condescending way she said them. Like I was incompetent, like I didn't belong. A few people chuckled nervously, others avoided eye contact. She had clearly been waiting for this moment, hoping I'd shrink under the weight of her jab. But I didn't. I stayed calm, steady, and without saying a word at first, I unlocked my phone. The room quieted as I scrolled to a familiar message. When I finally spoke, my voice was even, almost casual. "Funny, Anna. Do you remember when you texted me that you had to feed him details to keep his trust?" I read the line aloud. The words echoed in the conference room, and the silence that followed was deafening. Anna's face went pale. She stammered, trying to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. The manager shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes darting anywhere, but at me. Before Anna could spin a story, Jessica spoke up. "She did the same thing to me," she said firmly. Heads turned. Murmurs rippled through the room. I didn't need to keep reading. The damage was done. For once, the spotlight wasn't on me. It was on her. She had wanted to humiliate me in public, but instead, she exposed herself. And I hadn't even raised my voice. Anna's confidence shattered the second the words left my mouth. She scrambled, laughing nervously as she said, "Oh, come on, that was taken out of context. I was joking." But no one was laughing with her. All eyes were on her, waiting, watching. She shifted in her seat, her usual polished demeanor slipping. Then came the outburst. She turned on me, snapping, "You're paranoid. You've always been jealous of me. Everyone knows you're bitter because you'll never have the kind of trust I have here." Her words came out rushed, frantic, like she was trying to claw her way out of quicksand. The more she spoke, the worse it sounded. Jessica folded her arms and shook her head, and a few coworkers exchanged glances that screamed, "So it's true." Even the manager, usually smug and unreadable, looked uneasy, like he suddenly realized. Being tied to her wasn't the advantage it once seemed. Anna kept talking, louder and sharper, but the room was already lost. Her credibility cracked in front of everyone, and there was no way to tape it back together. The office felt different in the weeks that followed. Anna kept her distance, surrounding herself with the handful of juniors who still clung to her like she was their mentor. But her power was fractured. The manager, once so smug with his little insider quips, avoided me entirely. No more digs about bridesmaids, no more jokes at my expense. Jessica and I grew closer again, our bond solidified by weathering the same storm. She told me she finally felt like the weight had been lifted, like we didn't have to keep second-guessing ourselves anymore. A few coworkers even confessed they'd suspected Anna was leaking things, but hadn't wanted to get involved. Knowing that others had seen the cracks made me feel validated, lighter. Slowly, the office narrative shifted. I wasn't cold, bitter, or paranoid. I was simply the one who finally drew a line. At home, my husband just shook his head and said with a grin, "At least she's not in the wedding album." He was right. Anna had written herself out of my story. I didn't need revenge beyond that. Looking back, I don't feel victorious. I don't feel like I won some battle or outsmarted anyone. What I feel is steady, like I finally reclaimed a piece of myself that I'd been handing away for years. With Anna, it wasn't one betrayal. It was 1,000 small ones. A joke repeated here, a secret slipped there, loyalty traded in for clout. It didn't explode all at once. It eroded. That's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. Sometimes it comes quietly, dressed up as friendship, and by the time you notice, you're already bleeding from the cuts. I never set out to destroy Anna. I never wanted her job, her influence, or her place beside that manager. I just wanted peace. What I realized is that protecting yourself isn't heartless. It's necessary. Some people thrive on drama, on twisting the truth, on keeping you small so they can feel big. You can spend your whole life trying to win them over, or you can finally decide enough is enough. I don't know what Anna and the manager really had, and I don't care anymore. What matters is that my life is no longer hers to narrate. Sometimes the strongest choice isn't revenge or reconciliation. It's stepping back, letting the friendship fade, and refusing to chase someone who never valued you to begin with. So, Reddit, here's the question. Am I the asshole for feeling relieved my bridesmaid didn't show up to my wedding? Was it cruel to let the friendship fade afterward, knowing she was grieving? Or was it the only way I could protect myself from someone who had been betraying me for years? My family thinks I should have tried harder, but my husband says I dodged a bullet. At work, the tension still lingers, but at least the truth is out. Did I go too far when I read her texts aloud? Or was that the only way to stop her lies? Am I heartless for not forgiving her, or finally free for standing my ground? You decide, AITA.